My name is Dean. I'm a recovering addict, and this is Inside Addiction. According to a report from the National Center on Addiction and Substance Abuse at Columbia University, 85% of the current prison population needs treatment for substance abuse. Of the 2.5 million inmates in prisons and jails in the United States, 1.5 million met the diagnosis criteria for substance abuse or dependence in accordance with the DSM-IV. Another 458,000, close to an additional 500,000, had a history of drug abuse or were under the influence of alcohol or drugs at the time of their crime, committed their crime to support their drug habit, were locked up for an alcohol or drug-related violation, or a combination of all the above. My guest today is Harold C., and he's one of those 2 million people. Harold, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Harold, let's start as a child. Tell me how it was growing up.
Okay, as far back as I can remember, I started, well, growing up in my family, it was okay. Middle class family. My mother worked, my father worked. I had a good upbringing. My mother used to have card parties and bingo parties on the weekends. And I used to go around to each female, sit on their laps, drink their beer, snatch their dimes and pennies, and go to the next one. I started drinking at an early age at 5.
So you started drinking when you were 5 years old?
5 years old, yes.
So at 5 years old, you were drinking.
Yes.
And tell me how soon did, honestly, that's pretty young.
Yes, it is.
I've heard of the age of onsets of like the average of, 12, 13, myself was 14, 5 years old. At 5 years old, how long would you say be able to look back now and say where you kind of a progression developed after 5 years old? Like, how long does that take?
Looking back, it started when it started. I started my grades, I was in kindergarten. I was absolutely uncontrollable.
In kindergarten?
In kindergarten. I would go to school drunk.
In kindergarten?
In kindergarten.
Where'd you go to school?
School
Around here?
Yes, in Albany.
In Albany, okay.
School 22 on
Okay.
2nd Street.
All right.
I was terrible in school, tantrums, outbursts, and they thought it was a family problem, but they never knew I was drunk. I would drink my mother's scotch in the morning before I leave, and I was drunk when I was in school, in kindergarten, and it progressed 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade. My wife and I had looked at my school records back then, and it was like astronomical. It was crazy. They couldn't control me. I was just out of it. So the progression was onset.
What kind of services, I understand we're going back to, at this point,
50 years ago.
50 years ago. What kind of services, if any, were offered, or what kind of meetings took place? Or, I mean, to me, nowadays, it's just, my wife is a school teacher. Mm-hmm. To me, it's like to grasp the concept of a 5-year-old going to school, I'm assuming smelling like alcohol and acting like something is drastically wrong. Like, what kind of interventions or services did the school or anyone offer you at kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade?
None. It was not until I was 9 or 10, people started recognizing my alcoholism.
How did they recognize it at that point?
By my behaviors. Not wanting to go to school, sleeping a lot, running amok, stealing, stealing church money. My mother was treasurer for the church. I used to steal quarters and things of that nature. Just my behaviors, my total behaviors.
At 9 and 10.
At 9 and 10, yes.
Now, was there ever a point when you were younger at that age, like it progressed to something beyond alcohol?
Not at that time. It just progressed into narcotics and Robitussin AC. Back then, it was cough medicine. We would drink it with beer. Not until I was 14 did it progress into hard drugs.
And hard drugs, what do you mean by
Heroin.
How'd you get introduced to heroin at age 14?
14.
50 years ago.
There was a gentleman by the name of George. He was an older gentleman. I was 14. I believe he was about 27, 28. He had just came from prison. He was into the drug trade, and he introduced us from drinking alcohol, giving us alcohol. He introduced us to heroin, another kind of drug, diavons, first diavons. Then he would get us to snatch pocketbooks, and then one evening we were just after snatching a pocketbook, he introduced us to heroin. I skin popped the first time. I didn't snort, I skin popped.
So you were shooting dope at 14?
I was at 14.
First time you do dope, you shoot it?
I shot it.
14 years old?
14 years old.
Same guy that introduced you to alcohol, provided alcohol, provided you heroin.
Yes.
You're shooting dope straight off the rip.
Yep.
At 14 years old?
14, yes. Yep. Then I started getting into heavy crime. I developed a habit.
How long did it take you to develop a habit at 14 years old?
Week 2.
Within a week
or
of first
two.
doing heroin at 14 years old,
yes.
you had a habit.
Yes. Yep. I skipped from marijuana. I didn't even deal with marijuana until a year or two afterwards. But
Alcohol, dope.
Alcohol, dope. Wild Irish Rose, Gypsy Rose, and Mad Dog, then heroin. Yes.
How's school then?
I didn't go.
Didn't what?
I went. The only reason why I went was to hustle. I went inside school. I was disruptive. I was off the hook. Everywhere I went, I started trouble. I was on the basketball team. We used to sneak alcohol in the school. My office was the girls' room. I would go in the girls' room and sell alcohol from the girls' room. How I was sneaking in the school, I would have somebody come downstairs with a trash can full of papers, and we would go out, have somebody drunk or skid row bum, as they would used to call them, by a liquor store, paid them to go get our wine, bring it back to school, put it in the trash can, transport it upstairs to the girls' room, and I would sell alcohol from there. I would be obliterated, while before I had it in my mind that I could play basketball better drunk.
You're the second basketball player that I've met. Chris Herron, who played for the Denver Nuggets and the Boston Celtics, who got sober at Daytop, south from here in 2008. Had shared his stories with me as far as shooting dope while he played for the Celtics.
Yes.
So you did it before Chris even did it.
Yes. Yeah. And something said, you can play better on alcohol.
Yeah.
So that's what I would do, or we would do, and go play basketball, and we would lose. But
at 14 years old, when were you first introduced to some sort of criminal justice system? Because you're drinking at 5, shooting dope, selling in school at age 14. Tell me, how long did this catch up with you where you get arrested?
I was close to 15. We started stealing cars. Back then they were Chevrolets that you just turn, it would be on, off,
Yeah.
and we would look at it and see if it was on, then we just steal cars. And there was facilities called Otisville and Warwick detention centers. And I would go there. First I went to Warwick for about 8 months, got out of Warwick, went back, first day out, started drinking. The progression never left me.
And this was when you were 15?
Yep. I was
15
going
years
15
old, so
years
you're
old.
already being detained,
Already, yes.
and it's alcohol and drug related.
Yes, yep.
Okay.
And from Warwick, I went to Otisville. From Otisville, I graduated to Albany County, Albany County Jail.
Once you turned a certain
16,
age?
yes.
16, you start getting
16.
locked up in Albany County Jail.
Yeah. My first arrest when I was 16, it was a youthful defender. It was closed, but
Alcohol or drug related?
alcohol, drug related. Every time I went to jail, it was because of alcohol and drugs.
How many times
and
you been to
usage.
jail, you think? Should have done a little prep work. I could have run a zip check on you.
67 times I was been arrested.
67 times you've been arrested,
67 times.
incarcerated. Every one of those 60 times could be considered alcohol or drug related.
Drug related, yep. Yep,
So you graduate to Albany County Jail when you're 16.
yes.
You get out. How was your life just in and out of jail? In and out of jail?
In
Were
and
there
out of
periods
jail.
of time where you weren't incarcerated and you were sober?
Not until I was, I don't know, about 20, 21, my brother OD'd off of heroin. And I made a decision
And
to
died.
try to, no, he didn't die.
Okay.
I brought him back. But I made a decision, or I tried to make a decision then to stop because of that reason, but it didn't work.
Yeah.
I've been in and out of rehabs. My first rehab was Bayview Rehabilitation Center
And how old
in
were
New
you then?
York. I was 16 or 17, something like that, because I knew I couldn't go back. I went there twice. I couldn't go back a third time when I violated not parole. It was addiction. It was something called Narcotic Addiction Control Commission back then. And I couldn't go back a third time. So I know in between 16 and 18, I was there 3 times. The third time I was there, I had superseded 18 years old. So, yeah, drugs. My whole life, drugs and alcohol. But if I start with alcohol, there's some questions in people's mind. My drug of choice today, they say it's cocaine, but I don't think so, because I wouldn't do cocaine unless I started drinking first. So my drug of choice is alcohol. But anytime I got in trouble, anytime I went to jail, it was behind alcohol and drugs.
And I think this is, I mean, saying that you were arrested 67 times throughout your life, I mean, don't get me wrong, I myself know, unfortunately at times, crime goes hand in hand with addiction.
Yes.
Then, incarceration goes hand in hand with crime.
Yes.
I'm not excusing, or I'm not making an excuse for crime. I'm saying, hey, there's an explanation. And with you, it goes back to the age of 5 years old. And if we just continue to make an attempt to incarcerate our way out of a drug problem or addiction, it's not working. It hasn't worked. If it did, why would you have been arrested 67 times? I mean, I know you and me know the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result, but apparently, it's, well, let's just keep, incarcerating people, and 85% of the prison population needs treatment for substance abuse. So if it was a solution, why is it still a problem? So throughout your 20s, in and out of jail, your brother overdoses. There's a brief moment of clarity in an attempt to say, whoa, I'm going to give this a shot.
Right.
which doesn't work out.
No, that never did.
So in your 30s,
30s, crime, still doing crime. I graduated from doing crime into dealing drugs to take care of my habit. I would deal drugs. When I got 32 years old, I got arrested for possession with intent to sell. I did one and a third to 4 years. That was my sentence.
and what year was that?
86.
In 86, do you recall like what kind of services or options were offered to you? Because I'm guessing somewhere along the line of the arrest, the investigation, the incarceration, for somebody that's been drinking since they were 5, shooting dope since they were 14, now years later, it's got to come up that you have a problem.
Yes. When I was 32, prior to being 32, I don't know how many rehabs or outpatient drug treatment programs I was in, but I was in quite a few. Not helping. I can't say it wasn't the program or it was the program. Everything starts with me and ends with me. So I have to take my part in this.
Sure.
So while I was in the rehabs, yes, I got all the lingo, all the sayings.
You got some seeds planted.
Yes.
But with those seeds, they have to be watered, or they're not going to grow.
Right.
So let me rephrase this question then. In the periods that you were incarcerated, across the board, because you're now how old?
58.
You're 58 years old now. You've been arrested 67 times. Started drinking you were 5, shooting dope when you were 14, in and out of rehabs, in and out of correctional facilities. In the correctional facilities, you maintained your abstinence.
Yes. It was like a pact with me. I would not get high. I would not make cooch, wine, jailhouse wine, or smoke marijuana, do heroin in jail. I didn't do it. I wouldn't do it.
You say I wouldn't do it. I didn't do it. I'm reading into that as it was available.
Yes.
What was available while you were in prison?
Heroin.
How far would you have to go?
Next cell.
Next cell to get dope.
Next cell or down the block.
Next cell or down the block to get your drug of choice.
Drug of choice. Alcohol.
In an environment where you were placed as a result of an offense that was related to alcohol,
yes,
and or heroin in your case.
Yeah.
Most recently you did 21, 32 months behind the walls?
Yes.
And that was in when?
2000. It started 2010 December 15th.
Okay, so you do 21 months. It ends up being 32.
32.
Fair to say alcohol and drug related again?
Yes, the whole thing. Yes.
You get out for a period of time and you get violated.
Yes.
Fair to say that, without getting into the details, respecting your privacy, that it all goes back and its roots are alcohol or drug related?
Yes.
So you've been out of jail and prison now since when?
August 16th.
Of what year?
2013.
August 16th of 2013. What's the longest period of abstinence you've ever had?
Maybe 2 years, 8 months.
2 years, 8 months. How long ago was that?
Quite a while ago.
Quite a while ago.
Quite a while
Most
ago.
recently, though, you now have
about 45 days.
About 45 days.
Yes.
And you have 45 days, and you're not incarcerated.
No.
And you're sober.
Yes. By the grace of God.
I guess.
Yes.
For somebody to start drinking at 5 years old, shooting
Yes.
dope at 14, in and out of the system.
Yep.
That I question the effectiveness of incarcerating addicts because I'll just ask you, you've been a participant of programs behind and outside of the walls.
Yes.
You mentioned you've been through outpatient programs. And again, I have a great deal of respect for the many men and women that work very hard on a daily basis in the drug and treatment court systems in the area. In a professional capacity, I work with them. Beyond that, I consider a lot of them personal friends of mine, but I just don't see with the numbers that can't be argued with, that 85% of the prison population needs treatment for substance abuse services, and out of the 2.5 million inmates currently in jail and prisons, almost 2 million of those people either meet the criteria, like yourself and me, for substance abuse or dependence, or at times like yourself committed a crime to support a drug habit, the addict becomes the dealer. Where the solution is. You're sober now, but for the grace of God, what keeps you sober?
Hope. Love.
You still have hope after years and years and years of being incarcerated. I'm going to go out on a limb and say trauma, if not before incarceration,
Yep.
during
absolutely.
incarceration, hope.
Hope. And basically, I know that this statement I'm saying can't keep me sober, but it's a big part. My son,
How old's your son?
he's 14, and my actions will predict his future. And I wanted to be a positive step instead of a negative step.
Your son's 14?
He's 14. And if I continue with the behavior that I was doing in the past, I believe it's going to repeat itself with inside him. And that I hope God and myself will not allow.
And you have the opportunity to see a 14-year-old that's not hooked on dope a week after skin popping.
Yep.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yep.
For you that says, all you've been through, I still have hope, what advice would you give someone that's still sick and suffering, that finds themselves in the same situations that you have, almost like on a hamster wheel or a treadmill or a rocking chair, that we exert all kinds of energy, but we don't end up going anywhere, and we get stuck in a cycle or a system? What advice would you give somebody that's may or may not right now be feeling hopeless, helpless, that started drinking when they were 5, that, I work in the field, and my own personal experience, at this point in my process, personally and professionally, there's really not much that surprises me, and I gotta tell you, when someone comes in and says, hey, I started drinking when I was 5 years old and I'm shooting dope the first time I use it, it's like, and to think of this is going back 50 years ago. Kids nowadays are talking about popping mollies and doing this. You're shooting dope at 14 years old 50 years ago. That's something where a lot of people have got to catch up. What advice do you give to someone that's had the same experiences that you've had, or is currently having those experiences, and the advice that someone that's looking for hope that you can give them?
Through all this and what happened through my lifetime, there was just a part of me that wouldn't give up on me. In the grace of God, me finding God, it's a big part of my recovery. When I started doing drugs, I guess at 5, or when I basically acknowledged that I had a problem, I ran from God. I just totally disowned God, my family, everybody. And the best suggestion that I could give anyone is just keep praying and hope, and don't give up on yourself, and love, and even when it's too hard, always ask for help. I guess that's about it. That's all I can say about that.
Hi, it's Dean from Inside Addiction, reminding you if you or someone you care about needs help for drug, alcohol, or gambling addiction, you can call the New York State Helpline at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY. You can also visit our website online anytime at insideaddiction.org. Go to Find Treatment and Help, which will take you to resources and contact information for treatment facilities across the country. You can watch our entire series at youtube.com/insideaddiction or right here on this channel.